Hey guys, feast your eyes on this absolutely better than new 1992 Ducati 900 SS. In this video, we go over some major components and rebuild some major components on this bike to get it into the condition that we have it right now. And as you can see, this thing is absolutely gorgeous. It's just dripping with unobtainium, titanium, carbon fiber titanium. We rebuild the carbs in this video. We rebuild the forks in this video. And we go over every nut and bolt, replace what's corroded. Anything the bike needed this year, we did it. I think you're really going to enjoy this video. And we started with a real good bike. But it sat for a couple years. Original paint on this tank. Original clear windscreen. You don't see that very often. So check it out, check out the video, and at the end of the video we're going to start this up. We're going to put a plate on it and we're going to take it for a shakedown, and I'm going to take you guys along for the ride. Hi folks, my name is Chip Carr and welcome back to our channel. Something a little different for our channel today. I want to show you what we're working on right now. This is my 1992 Ducati 900 SS. I'm going to give you a little backstory on this bike. I've owned this bike for almost 30 years. I bought this bike in 1994 and have put about 30,000 miles on it. And we're doing a little refresh on this bike for the spring and for the riding season. I haven't touched this bike in almost 2 years. It's time for a refresh. Life has been busy, and what started the refresh this year is I purchased a set of vintage Brembo full floating discs for this bike. These are the floating discs that would have been on the SPs, and a friend of mine had those. I restored those. We'll take a look at those a little bit later, but that's what got this project started this year. And I figured, well, I'm pulling the wheels off to change the front rotors. We're going to put new tires on it. So we picked up some Pirelli Rosa Corsa 2s. Really nice tires, super sticky. Those are going to be great. But we'll talk a little bit more about the wheels and the parts that we put back on as we put them back on. What I want to talk about first is what we have on the bike right now. Might as well start with the motor. This is the original motor for this bike. The cases have never been split. It's stock crank, stock transmission, bearings, everything's original. And that's about where it stops there for originality for this motor. This bike is equipped with an aluminum lightweight flywheel, a lightweight slipper clutch, high compression stock bore pistons from Fast by Faraci. We're about right around 12-to-1 compression. Big valves, stain tune spaghetti full header and exhaust, which sounds amazing. You'll hear that after we get everything put back together. But the first thing we did this year was start the bike because it hadn't been started in a while, and we had a fuel leak. So as you can see, the carburetors are off the bike right now, along with the airbox. We're running a set of 41mm key-in flat slide carburetors, and I just finished a rebuild on those. We have some footage of what we replaced on those carburetors. And I figured, well, the fuel lines are original 1991 vintage fuel lines, so I have new fuel lines on the way and a new fuel petcock for the bike. The bodywork is over here. This is a full fairing bike, but we have changed it to a super light tail section, which is just absolutely gorgeous. There's the tank, the air box, air filter. We'll touch more on those parts as we put them back together. We've changed the oil cooler location from the bottom underslung mount to the top mount with stainless braided hoses. Like I said, the bike has STM lightweight slipper clutch basket with the Polymoto vented cover. The bike is just, it runs really well. It's been on the dyno almost right around the 100 horsepower mark for this bike, which is great for a stock bore motor. Now I do have a set of brand new Pistol big bore 966 pistons for this bike. We're not going to do that this year. I'm not going to have time to do that. So for this year, just a quick refresh. Any leaks we're going to address. Like I said, the carburetors fully rebuilt, new fuel lines, petcock. This left front fork seal is leaking, so those forks are coming off. I have all the parts to totally rebuild these forks with the bushings and seals, and we're going to put a travel indicator. Showa makes a nice 41 millimeter travel indicator. Now, these forks have already been modified with Racetech Gold valves and HyperPro springs, along with the back shock. This is the stock original back shock, but it's been revalved with a Racetech Gold valve and a HyperPro spring. So that's it for the suspension. Like I said, the motor, just a fantastic engine, runs very well. It's got some great, all the popular modifications for this engine. Open element, air box, 41 millimeter flat slides, high compression pistons, big valves, and like I said, lightweight flywheel and clutch basket. This exhaust, like I said, stain tuned spaghetti header. This is going to come off. What we're going to do is we're going to get the bike back together where it will start. I'm going to start it, check for leaks again, and after I'm satisfied we don't have any leaks, then we're going to take the exhaust off, clean that up, clean the swing arm up, and we have some nice new parts that are going to go on. We're going to change the brake lines. We'll talk about those as we do that job. These are already Frentubo Kevlar brake and clutch lines with a stainless Frentubo rear brake line. And Frentubo makes carbon fiber lines now. So we're changing all the lines to Frentubo carbon fiber, front and back brakes, clutch line. So that's going to be a nice improvement. Now this frame has been repowder coated years ago. One more thing I want to tell you about the backstory of this bike. Not your everyday average 900 SS. We took it to Daytona Beach, Florida in 2007, and we came back with this fantastic best-in-class trophy. This bike won Best 750 to 1000 cc belt drive twin. This trophy was from CycleCat. It's a powder-coated CycleCat triple clamp mounted on a nice piece of black plexiglass. So real proud of that trophy.
So here are the cleaned and rebuilt Kian 41 millimeter flat slide carburetors, and they were really due. These are all the parts that came out of those carburetors. As you can see, the float bolt O-rings are just trashed. No wonder they leaked. So all the O-rings, seats were changed, hardware, fuel T pipe, equalizer pipe, accelerator pump diaphragm and O-rings were all changed. So they're as good as new now, and fantastic carburetors. They've always worked very well, but like I said, they were leaking, and it's a good thing we caught that. That will burn your motorcycle down to the ground. If that's not caught, you get a fuel leak on a hot headers, and poof, there you go. Bye-bye Ducati. So I'm glad we caught that. So another interesting modification that we're doing to the bike this year is we are changing the sprocket nuts. When I bought this sprocket originally years ago, it was flat, no counterbores for the nuts, and I had to use these fairly generic zinc plated nuts, no flange, because they're low, and didn't really care for those. So I found these black titanium 12-point flange locking nuts, and these are from Pro Bolt. But what we have to do, as you can see, the nut is a little proud of the stud. So in order to get that below the end of the stud, we need to counterbore the mounting holes. And in order to do that, you need a counterbore with a pilot. And this is an interchangeable pilot counterbore. So depending on the size of your pilot hole, you can change the pilot to counterbore different size pilot holes. So we're going to set this up in our drill press, and as you can see, I think we're going to start with a 1.5 millimeter deep counterbore and see where we're at. That should be sufficient. At the most, 1.75 millimeter deep counterbore on this, and then after the sprocket is counterbored, if everything goes well, we're going to have the sprocket Cerakoted in this color. That's called tungsten, and it's going to give it a kind of a contrast between the black 12-point nuts and the sprocket. So we're going to set our drill press up, and we're going to see how this goes. The pilot holes, the mounting holes, I've already enlarged those by a 1/64th of an inch to fit this 13/32 pilot. I couldn't find these in metric sizes. So that's a 13/32 diameter pilot and a 3/4 inch 4-flute counterbore, which works out to perfect dimensions for the mounting holes and the flange nuts. So, you know, it's all in the details. It's all in the details. And these 12 points are really going to make the sprocket installation stand out. So let's set it up and see what we can do. So as you can see, we have our sprocket clamped down onto our drill press table. We've already aligned our pilot with our mounting hole, and we have put some oil on both the counterbore and the sprocket, and we're going to see what happens. Now this is an aluminum sprocket and a brand new counterbore, so this should go pretty smoothly. As you can see, we've already made a mark. And we're going to want to keep putting fluid on this. I don't have any cutting fluid, machining fluid handy, so this is going to have to do it. What I'm probably going to do is shut this camera off and have the oiler in one hand and run the drill press with the other, so we can constantly keep lubrication on it. But this looks like it's going to work out well. So there you have it. The counter bores are all done, and I'm very pleased. The edges have been relieved with some 150 grit sandpaper. As you can see, the 12-point nut sits down just below the top of the stud. The lock tabs are engaged. I'll also use some medium strength Loctite on these because it is titanium on steel. But I'm really happy with this, how this came out. And I do not know why this sprocket was not counterbored from the factory. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't, but we fixed it this time. But this is really going to look sharp. Here's the color we're going to go with again. It's called tungsten. It's got a little bit of a flake to it, kind of a metallic in there, and it's going to look good. Going to be a nice contrast against the black 12 points. So yeah, next step is to get this to the Cerakoter, and we'll be set. This is going to be a nice little detail for this bike this year. So as you can see, we're starting to go in the other direction now with the bike, starting to put everything back together. We have our cleaned and rebuilt flat slide carburetors mounted back on the bike, and I think you can see where I've used Oetiker clamps to mount the carburetors to the intake boots and also to mount the airbox boots onto the carburetors. I'm not a big fan of worm drive hose clamps. I think the Oetiker clamps make a much neater, cleaner job. I think they look good. They're stainless steel. I found that the easiest way to do this is to mount the airbox boots to the carburetors first, and then as you set the airbox down on top of these boots, you'll have to work this groove into the flange and the airbox, but it allows you to get those clamped onto the carbs real good and solidly, which you don't have a lot of room to work those clamps once the airbox is installed. So that's the sequence I go. Right now, the next step is, like I said, we're putting all new fuel lines on this bike from the carburetor to the tank, and I'm waiting on those, so we can't do those today, but they'll be along shortly. And this bike takes a 7mm ID metric size fuel hose, and that's available through Bellmetric, and they're also supplying the high pressure Oetiker clamps for those connections. We're going to do new lines, new clamps, new gas tank petcock, and a new stainless steel 5/16 Y, where the return line and the supply line come together to go to the carburetor. So there's a fuel pump inside the tank on this bike, and any unused fuel goes back to the tank via the return line. So that's what that looks like. Real happy with that. You can see we have our intake manifolds have been previously polished. We cleaned those up a little bit. We also have polished our valve covers on this bike. So it's coming along. Next step, fuel lines, and then petcock, and we can get the tank on and fire it up and check again for fuel leaks and adjust the throttle cables. You see we have those hooked up, but that'll need final adjustment along with the idle. and we'll do that. And I think then after we confirm that there's no fuel leaks, everything's adjusted, we're going to take the exhaust off, start getting that cleaned up. The forks have to come off. Like I said, we have the left leg is leaking, so both those legs come off for a rebuild. And step by step, we'll get it back together, and hopefully you'll follow along. See you on the next step. Okay, guys, so we're starting to get some of our new fuel line parts in. And as you can see, we have a roll of new 7mm hose. This hose is made in Germany, a 7mm ID. I sourced this from Bell Metric. I get a lot of parts, a lot of metric fasteners and items like the fuel hose from Bell Metric. They're a great source. We have a new original style fuel petcock made by the company who made the original fuel petcocks for Ducati. I sourced this from Valter Moto from eBay. This is a stainless steel 5/16 splitter. This is from Quantum Fuel Systems, and these are high pressure gold zinc plated Oetiker clamps, also from Bell Metric. The only thing I'm waiting for are new quick disconnects. They're coming from Dennis Kirk. I like these. It makes the tank very easy to take off. You don't have to struggle with breaking seals and clamps. You just push those quick disconnects, and they shut the fuel off and also disconnect the line. So I have new disconnects coming. Now, like I said, the size of this hose is a 7mm ID. And one of the important reasons that you want to go with a 7mm line versus a 5/16, which is a little bit bigger, or a quarter, which is a little smaller, is this item right here. That's a jet or a pill, whatever you want to call it. We'll see if we can get it to focus. We'll see if we can get this to focus a little bit better. That's a restrictor jet, and that goes in the return line. So we'll say this is the return side of this Y. We'll say this is your supply side of the Y. This jet will go about right here in the fuel line. And what that does, it creates, I guess, a little bit of what you would say back pressure. In other words, it ensures that the fuel that goes to the flat slide carburetors is under less resistance. So the carburetors theoretically are going to be served first, and the excess fuel will come back through the return line, through that jet, and back to the tank. The Ducati 900 SS has a fuel pump inside the tank. So when you have a fuel pump, you need a return line, or you will overpressurize your float seats, and possibly flood, or you will flood the carburetor. So a lot of guys don't know that this jet is in their original fuel lines, and because you can't see it, it's hidden inside the fuel line. It's a press fit in there. The OD is 7.5mm, just a little bit bigger than the ID of the fuel line, and with a 4mm ID. And guys will replace their fuel lines because, this line here in question that we're replacing, the date on it is 1991. It's been around a while. The ends, especially where the clamps are, they're hard as a rock. So if you would go to reuse those on a fitting, it's going to be very hard to reseal. The rubber is just very, very hard, versus this new very pliable, very, very pliable, fresh fuel line. So, will the bike run without the jet? Yeah, it might. You may starve for fuel on the top end if that jet is not in there. So, anybody that has one of these bikes and you're contemplating replacing the original fuel lines, make sure you find that jet. It is in the just upstream of the original plastic splitter. This is kind of what the original plastic splitter looks like. These particular ones are from Motion Pro. I opted to go with a slightly bigger splitter made of stainless steel versus the plastic this time. So that's what's going on right now. We're going to start cutting this to length, cutting these pieces to length, getting together what we can, and when our quick disconnects get here in a couple days, we'll finish it up. We'll be able to fire the bike up, check for any fuel leaks, and then we can change the oil in the filter and go from there. So that's where we're at in the project. Fresh lines, fresh petcock, obviously new clamps, a beautiful stainless Y, and we'll be getting new quick disconnects on the way too. So there you have it. So guys, I wanted to share this with you. The same gentleman who I bought the fuel petcock from, Walter Moto on eBay, had for sale these posters. And it's the Kentucky Kid, Nicky Hayden, and Valentino Rossi. They became teammates 20 years ago in 2003, obviously riding Ducatis. And I believe they were teammates for a couple years, 2-3 years maybe. And so these were given out at the French and German Grand Prix. And along with this, you get 2 rider cards, fan cards, one for Nicky and one for Val. And their bios are on the back. And they are in French and German, their bios are. And the theory is that it rained on those 2 GP weekends, so they didn't hand a lot of these out. $10 for this fantastic poster of Nicky and Val, along with the fan cards. And this will frame very nicely. This is going to go in my YouTube studio that I'm working on now. Just great memories. What a great rider. Loved rooting for Nicky and Val on the Ducatis. Like I said, I've had my Ducati since 1994 and was a Ducati fan for a couple years before that. But so for $10, if you want one of these, check it out. Walter Moto is the seller on eBay. Had a whole stack of these. So there you go. Nicky Hayden, Valentino Rossi. What a great pair. Nice little poster. The color is really nice. Just a great photo. Look how young Val looks in this photograph. 20 years ago. So guys, before these fuel lines go back in the bike, I wanted to show you this stainless steel 5/16 splitter and these high pressure Oetiker clamps from Bellmetric. Just makes a really nice, neat job. As I said before, I am not a fan of worm drive hose clamps, especially when you get down into the smaller sizes. So the next step is to cut these to the length we need. The new disconnects showed up. These are the old quick disconnects. We have new ones to put in line. But you have to, because it's a tight fit between the frame and the cylinder head on these fuel lines, you have to cut these to length. Fish them through first, and then put your quick disconnects in line. If you do those first, you won't get them
through that tight space. So yesterday we got the rear sprocket back from the Cerakoter. I said previously I was going to have this coated in a tungsten, which is a dark gray color. Changed my mind. This is smoked bronze from Cerakote, and it really blends nicely with the gold Marvick wheels. And since we're looking at these, I might as well tell you a little bit about these wheels. These are Marvick cast magnesium 5-spoke Penna 2s. And had these on the bike for a few years. This would be the second set of tires on these wheels. These are brand new tires. These are Pirelli Rosa Corsa 2s. A really nice sticky street track tire. These are without a doubt the best tires that have ever been on this bike. And this should be a blast to ride the 900 SS with these Pirellis. So this assembly's done. Ready to go back on the bike, although that's going to be a few steps down the road yet. We have some work yet to do. The swing arm needs repolished and whatnot. So since we're looking at the back wheel, might as well look at the front. And this is what started the project this year. These are vintage Brembo full floating front brake rotors that would have been on the 900 SS SP models. These are full floaters. And you can't get these anymore. A friend of mine had these. He agreed to sell them to me for a great price. And I had the carriers Cerakoted, refinished, changed all the full floating bobbins, and used titanium fasteners, gold titanium fasteners. So that's ready to go back on the bike too. Like I said, we have to rebuild the forks, but now that we got the sprocket back, the wheels are set. This bike originally did not have full floating discs. I had braking full floaters on for a good while, just took those off. Just really wanted the, the factory Ducati parts that would have been on the higher spec 900 SS's. So there they are, and just fantastic looking. I'm real happy with the look of these, with those Pirellis. So coming along well. So guys, there we have it. There's our new petcock and our new quick disconnects. Fuel line's all routed. There's our stainless splitter. And up to the carburetor. So it just needs tidied up with some zip ties, but the next step, the tank comes back off so we can work on getting the air box and the battery box, which is all one piece, back on the bike. So like I said, tank comes back off, air box, all the wiring put back, and then we'll be ready to fire it up. But I'm pretty happy with that. Well, the Ducati is a runner again. We have the air box back on, everything's wired up. We have done a test run, got it warmed up, checked for fuel leaks. We took the opportunity to change the oil in the filter. And so far, so good. Carburetors seem to be working well. Okay guys, we've taken the forks off the bike and I've cleaned them up real well. And I gotta tell you, these forks, for being 30 years old, with about over 30,000 miles on them, they're very nice shape. The chrome is excellent, there's no pitting. The gold anodized is pretty nice. There's small marks where they were clamped into triple clamps, but all in all, these forks are very, very nice condition. So we've already loosened the top caps before we loosened our triple clamps. That's a good tip. Unless you have a special vise for these, it's best to loosen those a little bit before you take them out of the triple clamps. We've got our quart of Amsoil lightweight shock therapy. I run Amsoil exclusively in everything when I can. We've got some mineral spirits to wash the forks out and flush the damper rods out. We've got some special tools here. That's our fluid level syringe and needle. We've got a really nice damper rod bleed tool from Motion Pro. That fits 5 different size threads, so that's the only tool you should need to bleed damper rods. We've got a really nice 41 millimeter seal driver. That's a ringer. That's a new style. That keeps the halves together. You don't have to worry about the halves falling apart. That's called a seal bullet or a fork tube bullet. That goes over the sharp edges on the top of your fork tube to slide your seals and bushings over, or mainly your seals. We have our spanner to push down on our damper rod and our lock tool. And we have all our bushings, seals, wipers, and this little thing here is called a travel indicator. That's new since this bike was built. I've always just used a zip tie, but this is much nicer than a zip tie. And these are all from K-Tech Suspension. They carry all the Showa parts. So we're going to get these things drained and taken apart, and we're going to show you some steps. We're not going to show you every step of the way. This video is more about the bike than just any particular part. There's a lot of great fork rebuilding videos on YouTube, so I'm going to spare you the details. But we'll show you some things. We'll show you if I find anything that doesn't look right. We'll show you that. But this should go pretty well. Like I said, these forks were revalved and resprung years ago, but they still have the original bushings and seals. And you can see, if you look real close, the wipers are starting to crack. That's a telltale sign that the rubber's getting old, and one of them is leaking. So it won't hurt to put, while we're in there, might as well put new bushings. They're not that expensive. This is one of those jobs where if your forks are in good condition, it's well worth rebuilding if you have a leak. And these are really nice shape. The bottoms are nice, as you can see, for a 1992 vintage Ducati. When the bike was new, it had rectangular reflectors on the bottoms here. Of course, everybody, takes reflectors off. And guess what was under the reflector? Right, a nice, beautiful embossed Ducati logo. So that was a win-win. So yeah, here we go. Let's rebuild these forks and get that step out of the way. Okay guys, we're gonna rebuild these 41 millimeter Showa forks real quick. First thing we're gonna do is open up both our rebound and compression valves and back our preload the whole way off. We've already counted our setup, our clicks, so we have that recorded. Take our 22 millimeter, back this the whole way off. We've already loosened up our top clamp, or our top cap, when they were clamped in the bike. 32 millimeter for the top cap. Gonna run that down. Get our spanner lugs engaged in the holes in the preload tube. Now these have HyperPro springs. They are a little more aggressive than the factory springs that were in these forks, so it's a little tougher to get this lock plate in, but it's possible. I could use a third hand but don't have one. For starters, we engage the top clamp on that washer, and now we have the jam nut engaged. We get our locking plate in position just like that. Now we take our 17 millimeter wrench for the flats on the bottom of the top clamp, and the jam nut's 14. Be careful of your preload needles. You got a set of 3 needles. That's your preload. You want to take care. Push those up out of the way. You don't want to bend those. There we go. Hold your jam nut, spin the top cap off of your damper rod. There we go. Set that aside. I'm going to take our lock plate back out. There's that. Pull off your flat washer and your nylon bush. Check those real quick. They look good. Set those aside. Oh yeah, she's good and nasty. That is some gray fork fluid right there. Set that aside. Well, it's pretty rough. Comes our spring. I'm going to work your damper rod up and down a little bit. That'll pump some of that dirty fluid out. Going to take a generous amount of mineral spirits. Pour it into the leg.
Just take our damper rod tool, screw it onto the top of the damper rod. And make sure our nut is the whole way down. And the mineral spirits are going to pump through the damper rod. You want to give your fork a good shake. I have a plastic putty knife that I've sharpened to get the dust wiper out. Just get it between the wiper and the leg. Get your fingers in there, pull that ring down. Make sure your fork is clamped really well. It's going to act like a slide hammer. Just like that. Okay, our fork leg parts are all cleaned up and are ready for reassembly. First thing we want to do is install our fork seal bullet. That goes over the sharp edges where the inner bushing rides. That keeps all the rubber parts from getting damaged as we put this back together. First thing we want to put on is our new 41mm travel indicator. And then goes our wiper. Now we've prepped these ahead of time. A little bit of red seal grease where they seat, and inside where they ride. There's our wiper. Snap ring. This is our new fork seal. We can take this off. Our washer. Our outer bush, which we've put a little grease on that too to help it go home a little bit better. You spread your inner bushing a little bit. It snaps in place. We'll get our seal driver in place. This is a Motion Pro ringer. How this works is you put the two halves together and then rotate those blue rings so the cuts are opposite of the cuts in your seal driver. This keeps the seal driver from coming apart. It's a really nice piece. Now here's a tip when you're working on these 41s. There is a collar at the bottom of the upper leg. And this collar will want to move up the leg. It's not all one piece. This is a separate piece. It'll want to move. So I found that if you put a couple wraps of good duct tape around this. This will keep this ring from wanting to move up as you try to drive the seal into this portion of the leg. Now the bushing drives into this part. So the bushing will drive, but if this part here moves up the leg, your seal will not drive into place. I'm going to put something over my hand. Now I don't want to drive onto my new wiper. So we're ready to drive. Let's see how this goes. Okay, it's starting to go now. There's a groove for this snap ring, and when you can see that groove, you know that you've driven the seal far enough. Not quite yet. But we're getting close. You can also, since now this slide is getting, since the seal is in here, it's getting a little tough. So you can actually go the other way, hold this in place. That sounded pretty solid. Let's take a look. I'm starting to see the groove. You want to make sure that collar is still down as far as it will go on this upper leg. Don't pinch your fingers between the driver. Okay, I can see my groove for the ring. Take our driver off, and we'll see if we can get our snap ring in place. Use a screwdriver to put it in place. Looks real good. Now we put our wiper in place. Very good. This is how this travel indicator works. It's real simple. It's a real nice telltale. Now we can take our duct tape off. Got 16 ounces of 5-weight AMSOIL shock therapy. Put our bleed tool on, our rod. And we want to pump this about 15 or 20 strokes. And what we're doing is we're getting the air out of our rod and our valve. And you want to check the level. Now this is per, these instructions are per the Hyper Pro spring manufacturer, and they want the level checked without the spring to 115 millimeters from the top of the fork. We've already set our rod up at 115, and so we're going to suck out any excess. When you start hearing it pull air, you're good. Just drop your spring in. Your preload tube. Your nylon bush and steel washer. Now you need to get down and retrieve your rod. So we've got that. You set your spanner up. Now at the same time as you push down, you want to be pulling up on your rod. Have to have your lock plate ready. So right now we're sitting on our washer. Okay, so we're locked in. You take your damper rod tool off. So how we put the cap on is your rebound screw, bring it all the way out, and then 3 full turns back in. Half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, and 3. That'll give you plenty of adjustment. Screw your rod or your cap down to where it touches your jam nut, and then a half a turn off or half a turn out on your rebound screw, and then you are safe to tighten now you want to run the jam nut up to the cap. There you go. Okay. There you go. Some fork fluid on your O-rings, on your threads, so they don't gall and it seals well. Hand tight is good for now. You can check that torque once you get your leg clamped back in your triple clamp. You check the torque on those top caps. You can reset your preload and reset everything. For now, I'm going to turn these the whole way out. Compression's already out. Very good. Okay, so now we have our rebuilt forks mounted back on the bike. The clip-ons are reset to where they were before and all tightened up. Before we install our front wheel and tire assembly, we are going to remove the front brake lines. These are Tubo Kevlar lines, and we've purchased all new lines for the bike, brake and clutch. They're all going to match. These are the latest from Tubo. These are carbon Kevlar lines with black anodized ends, and let's see if we can get a close-up of this. There we go. That's a carbon fiber weave over Kevlar tubing. And this is really going to be a nice setup. A little more understated than the blue and red lines. But I really like these, and they're all going to match now. The back brake line's going to match the clutch and the front brake lines. So they're all going to be the carbon Kevlar lines. I like them. So we'll get those lines off, get the new lines, or we'll take these the old lines off. We're going to do some more cleaning where I haven't hit. I see some spots I missed. Get that cleaned up, hard to reach areas while everything is off. And we're going to mount our tire and wheel assembly. And we have another surprise today. We'll show you those here in a bit. But let's get these off and we'll get that mounted and we'll show you some other new parts we have for the bike. So we've got our front wheel mounted up and I'm really happy with the way these reconditioned brake rotors look with these Marvic cast magnesium wheels. If there's anybody that doesn't know what a full floating disc is, you can see the movement, the lateral movement in the disc itself. So there's not a solid attachment between the carrier and the rotor. And that allows for more expansion during the heat cycles and keeps these from warping. Another thing it allows it to do is it allows the rotor to move within the caliper when you put the brakes on. This will center itself within the pads. Just a all-around better brake rotor than a non-floater. So the next step, we're going to mount our calipers, and I got to show you, we've got some new parts here, and I'll explain what we did and why we did it. The stock caliper is this one on the right, and that's the new updated Gold Line Brembo calipers. And here's why we bought these new calipers. I took these off the bike, cleaned them all up, took them completely apart, and wanted to have them re-Cerakoted and put all new seals in. Well, as I started to add everything up, by the time you have the housings coated by all new pads, pins, clips, seals, for just a couple bucks more, there's a brand new Brembo Gold Line caliper. As you can see, they've updated the graphics a little bit. So it's kind of a no-brainer. These were not leaking, but they were real grungy, and I wanted to take them all apart. And once I took them all apart, I wanted to put new seals in. And everything just started to add up. So I decided, you know what, we're just going to buy new calipers. Now, the only thing I don't like about these new calipers, they use a dull zinc Torx fastener instead of a gold zinc Allen head. There's no question Torx is the better fastener. There's no question about it, especially in smaller sizes. This size, yeah, not too bad with the Allen heads. Yeah, you can round them, but you'd have to really try with that size. So what we did is we have all new gold zinc plated Allen head cap screws. And once we get these mounted, we're going to swap the pinch bolts out. To give it more of a factory look, in 1992, Torx was way down the road yet. So you didn't see a lot of Torx fasteners, if any, really on this bike. There weren't any. So in keeping with the originality of the bike, we're going to change those pinch bolts out. And I think it's going to look really good once we do that. Not crazy about I like the Torx heads, but not really crazy about the silver, the dull silver. So that's what's going on. We're going to get these new calipers mounted up. and we'll see what's next. Probably run the new brake lines. Okay, so there's the new Brembo caliper with the factory Brembo Torx clamping screws, and I've changed the other caliper over already. This is what it looks like with the gold zinc clamping screws, the Allen heads. I just think it looks a lot better. It matches the screws that hold the caliper onto the fork, and it's more period correct. And to be honest with you, I just like the gold. That goes well with the gold wheels and the gold brake disc carriers, the gold forks. So we'll get the other side swapped out, and then we will start routing the new carbon Kevlar front brake lines. So we have finished changing out the hardware, the clamping screws on these new Brembo calipers. And there's a nice daylight shot of the front end. The front fender is at the painters. I have a carbon fiber front fender that I had customized a few years ago with a Ducati racing stripe, and it's getting touched up at my painters right now. What happened with that was this vent hose that comes out of the tank through the steering stem, and it ends at the bottom of the steering stem. And on a real hot day, if the tank was real full, I would get some gas that would pump up out of that, drip down onto the back of the front fender, and bubble the paint. So we're having the fender fixed, and I have a new roll of, hey Tonka, there's my buddy Tonka. So I have a new length of vent hose for the tank, and we're gonna extend that to where it doesn't end above the fender. So if that would happen again, it's not gonna damage the fender. As you can see, we have our new Friend Tubo carbon Kevlar brake lines mounted. And I'm not gonna bleed these right now. I may wanna adjust these at these banjo bolts at the bottom. I wanna wait and see when the fender is on it. So for now, those lines are empty, but they're mounted. And here's what it looks like up top with that double banjo bleeder. I really, really like these. Understated, but yet bristling with trickery, as Ken Kaplan from Kaplan's Cycles would say. Bristling with trickery and unobtainium. And I'll tell you, some of this stuff is hard to get. So what we've done, we've also mounted our new clutch line, the new carbon Kevlar clutch line. Now this is just obviously a single banjo bleeder, but it really helps to have these bleeders up top, because that's where the air's gonna wanna go. So we did bleed the clutch line. I'll show you what that looks like down here at the slave cylinder. Now, this is an STM slave cylinder that's been on for a few years, and I really like the black fittings and the black carbon Kevlar lines. Along with these lines, they give you some spiral wrap chafing gear. Now this needs tied up to the frame. Number one, I have to get some white tie wraps, not natural, but pure white. You can hardly see them on this white frame. So I need to pick some of those up, and I don't like to really tie things up until I know for sure we're all set, all cleaned up, everything's adjusted well, and then we'll tie these up. But that chafing gear is nice, and it just looks really good. The other Kevlar lines, the blue ones that were on the bike, didn't come with any chafing gear, so I would take some rubber hose and and split it and wrap it and zip tie it. This kit so far has really been complete. And I like the black. It's understated but yet trick. So that's it. We have one more line to put on. That's the back brake line, but we have some other work that we want to do before we do that, and we're going to get to that here in a quick second. You just can't argue with that. You just can't. That's just gorgeous. The cast magnesium Marvics with those full floating vintage Brembo rotors, new Brembo calipers, new carbon Kevlar lines. There you can see some of that spiral wrap chafing gear. Nice, very nice. I like it. So you can see we have the tank off the bike again, and here's the reason why. This Shirai battery that was in here in the bike on the left, many years, probably at least 10 years old. It started the bike, but then it wouldn't take a charge. So its useful life is over. The battery on the right is the new battery. It's an anti-gravity with a restart feature. The original battery size for this Ducati, the lead acid, was a 16. Couldn't match that up exactly. The 12 is the closest that came to the original size. So when we bought this tiny little Shirai, it came with a whole bunch of adhesive back gray foam. And that's what you see in here. I padded the box out so the battery, so the new Shirai would fit in the original location. That's all coming out. All that gray foam is coming out. I'm not going to need as much. As you can see, the anti-gravity is taller and a little bit wider. And I have some really nice black adhesive back foam. We're not going to need to use it nearly as much. It's going to look a lot neater. One nice feature about this anti-gravity is it's got a post on all four corners, so you can flip it around if your positive is not on the right side. So the original lead acid battery had 200 cold cranking amps. The one that has been in there, the Shirai, see if we can get up close, that is 270. The new one is 360 cold cranking amps. In the restart feature, once this battery gets below a certain voltage, it shuts off. It will not allow itself to discharge. If you have a parasitic draw, which this bike doesn't, but if you would happen to, and it's drawn on your battery, once it gets below a certain voltage, it will shut itself off. You hit that restart button on the top, and then the theory is, you start up and you ride away and recharge. So I also had new igniters ordered. That's those little black boxes on each side of the California CycleWorks coils. I had new digital igniters ordered. They showed up yesterday. Ordered them from Carmo USA. They came from the Netherlands. They were physically wider, so they wouldn't fit in these rubbers. These are rubber mounted. They wouldn't fit in the rubbers correctly. One of the locking tabs was broken off. And on the information tag, some of the information was scratched out on both of the igniters. And they were expensive. They were almost $400. So they're going back. They're going back this week. And I'm currently researching. There's other igniters out there. There's some Ducati performance igniters out there.
These are the original igniters, 30 years old. I believe there's better igniters that we could use, so we're going to experiment a little bit. But right now, we're going to rip all this foam out, clean this original battery box up, and get the new anti-gravity battery hooked up, get the tank back on, and give it a fire and see how it does. So we've removed all the old gray foam from the battery box and cleaned up all the old adhesive and installed new black foam, 2 half-inch layers of foam, which will bring the new lithium anti-gravity battery up to about the stock height where it would sit. This new slightly larger anti-gravity battery not only has more cold cranking amps than the Shirai that was in there, it's actually lighter. It's larger, but also lighter. This thing, it weighs next to nothing. You'd think there was nothing in there really. So that's a great improvement over the stock lead acid battery. Plus, this is another 160 cold cranking amps over the original battery. So we're going to get that wired in. I installed a new overflow line for the tank. So we're going to put the battery in, put the tank back on, trim this new line to length, fire it up, see how it cranks with the new battery, let it run for a little bit, and when we shut her down, we also have new plugs to put in. So we're going to put new plugs in before we start it. Going to let it run for a bit, see how it cranks, and after it cools down, it's time to take this stain tuned spaghetti header off. It's pretty nasty, needs cleaned up. Clean that up, do the final detail clean on the motor. The swing arm needs repolished, so we'll clean that swing arm up, and then we can start doing some more assembly work on the bike. So it's coming along. I'm happy with it so far. For a 30-year-old Ducati, she's a dime piece, as Kenny Kaplan likes to say. She's a dime piece, and it really is. It really is a nice bike. A lot of these bikes over the years have just gotten used up and trashed. There's some good ones out there. You can still find a decent one for a project bike. Rarely do you see one of this vintage. These aren't quite as rare or as valuable as your 888s, your 851s. This particular model ran from 1991 to 1998. So a really nice long model run. Okay guys, things are looking pretty good. We removed the entire exhaust system for a cleaning. Originally this stain tune header was a mirror finish. It's stainless steel. It was polished to a mirror finish. I decided to go with a matte, a brushed finish this time. I used a red Scotch-Brite pad and WD-40 to put a nice matte brushed finish on there. As you can see, we've already got one heat cycle in it, and it turns a nice gold color. Something else you may not notice is those billet aluminum exhaust flanges. Those came from Speedy Siegel out of Seattle, Washington. Those are really cool. A lot nicer than the factory steel ones. Lost a little bit of weight by replacing those. We also used
Let me see if we can see it from this side. We now have 12-point titanium locking flange nuts for the exhaust flanges and also for the intake. We got another order from ProBolt. Those were in that order. They just came in today along with the flanges. So we got the exhaust system mounted back up and cleaned up, washed it real good, degreased it after we cleaned it, and it looks real good. I like the gold, the brushed gold finish. And we've already gone ahead and repolished our swing arm. This was Keller buffed years ago, but they oxidized a little bit over time, but this cleaned up really nice. Let's give you a real good look at this spaghetti header. That's why it's called a spaghetti header. The factory header, the pipes came together in a stamped cross, very restrictive. This is not. They all flow together very nicely, as you can see. Stain-tuned spaghetti header. Stainless steel. I left the mufflers, the mirror finish. I like those in a polished mirror finish. Those are beautiful. Here's where it changes. If you can pick that up or not, where it goes from a matte, right there where the muffler slips into the header, goes from a brushed finish to a mirror finish. Okay, so things are moving along. Waiting on front fender and rear hugger. It's at the painter right now. Hope to get those back shortly. There's a few things we can do yet. These cam bearing covers, they're going to come off and get repainted, both of them. They're going to get refinished. Some other odds and ends. But the bike is coming along well. Okay guys, today we're going to work on the back of the bike. We have some nice new parts here I want to show you. These are the original chain adjuster bolts. As you can see, they're pretty corroded. These are the original axle sliders. They're okay, a little beat up. The pads are a little beat up. And the original axle nuts. Serviceable, not bad. But over here, we have some beautiful titanium axle or chain adjuster bolts from ProBolt. You can see it has a slightly bigger lock nut. The head's a little bit bigger on the bolt itself. We have some brand new axle slider blocks from Ducati. Actually, these came from Valtra Moto, but they're OEM Ducati parts. And from Stratifab, we have these beautiful titanium axle nuts. Just gorgeous. So we're going to use our original axle. It cleaned up very well. Nothing wrong with that axle at all. So we're going to get these bolts in. We're going to do a mock-up on our rear caliper so we can get this Frentubo rear brake line plumbed up and bled while we're waiting on our carbon fiber rear inner fender to be re-cleared. It's actually, I'm happy to plumb this brake line up and bleed it without the rear fender on or without the wheel on too. You know, there's always that chance of stray brake fluid, and that really sucks to get that anywhere but, you know, where you want it, which is in the reservoirs or in the lines or in the caliper. So while we wait on some Bodywork, we're going to get some loose ends tied up here. I just wanted to show you these really nice OEM and titanium parts. It's really going to look nice. Okay, so we've gone ahead and mocked up our rear brake caliper temporarily so we could put our rear brake line on. This is the new carbon Kevlar rear brake line, and I wanted to get that mounted, and we're going to bleed it here in a minute. But first I wanted to explain this rear braking system. This is not the original rear braking system that came on the bike. Most of the 900 SS's had a fixed rear caliper mounted above the rear axle. This is a system that was on the SPs and the FE, and it's called a full floater. It's different from the front full floating discs in the fact that the disc itself is not a full floater, but this system, the way it's mounted, there's a plane bearing that rides on the axle shaft and a rod with heim joints or rod ends on each end. And what it allows this caliper to do is rotate on the axle as the suspension goes up and down. And that reduces any chance of brake lockup over rough roads. If you have the rear brake on, it'll eliminate brake chatter as it allows the caliper to move with the suspension. So these were sourced from Ducati, years ago, from the SP model. It's a nice addition to the bike. So the next thing we need to do is bleed this line. And the upside down caliper presents a little bit of a challenge in the fact that, as you can see, the bleeder for this caliper is facing downward. So what we want to do is first we will put a wooden shim in between those pads to simulate a rotor, and we will disconnect it. We'll flip it the other way so it's right side up, so to speak, and we'll set it on a stand or something solid so the bleeder is facing up. And then we have our bleeder banjo at the top of the system on the master cylinder. So that said, let's get this caliper off, turn it right side up, and we'll bleed this out. And with these two bleeders, this will be a breeze. But when I originally installed this setup on this bike, I could not bleed this until I took the caliper off and turned it right side up so the bleeder faces up. So there's a trick for you. Here's a nice, I want to show you this clamp. This is a aluminum line clamp from Racetronics. It fit really well. What I had to do was, I think it was drilled for a 1032 countersunk screw. This is a 5mm, so we had to drill out the hole a little bit to accept the 5mm and then re-countersink it because the head is wider than the 1032 countersunk. But that's a stainless steel 5mm black diamond coated screw from ProBolt again, who is supplying a lot of the specialty fasteners, and I think that looks really tricky. It comes in a lot of different sizes. The rubber isolator came on the brake line, so you have to size your clamp to the isolator, and it's a perfect fit and looks really good. So let's get to bleeding this line and move on. Hi, Tonka. Another bone down. So just real quick, guys, this is what I was talking about. To bleed this full floating rear brake caliper, you want to turn it upside down, put it on a stand or something to hold it up. That'll put your bleeder at the top, and it bled right out, so we're good to go. Okay, guys, we've done a little more work and we've got some more parts in. Like I said, we touched up these cam covers, just prepped them, spray painted them a semi-gloss black, and then took a piece of sandpaper
and sanding off the paint down to the aluminum, so we have our nice Ducati logo visible. We've got a nice carbon fiber chain guard. This comes from a company in Italy. It's an Italian name, Aviato Composto or something like that. The quality is very good. Something that I had a real hard time getting, and that is white tie wraps. I looked everywhere, all my sources. Ended up Moose Racing from Parts Unlimited. They come in a pack of 30. You get 10 4s, 10 6s, and 10 8s. I've got 3 packs. Now these are not, these are white. These are an actual white zip tie, and that was the problem. This is a white frame Ducati. If you're working on a white frame bike, you're going to have to use tie wraps for some of the wires and hoses, and the natural black just doesn't look good. So we finally got white, and we got 3 packs. That should last us a while. We've got new gaskets for our cam covers. These came from Walter Moto. We've got new left and right dash panels. My original one on the right was cracked. It got some, I'm guessing maybe possibly some brake fluid on it, so it was discolored in spots. These are actually OEM Ducati. These are from Star Twin Motors in the Netherlands. They specialize in OEM Ducati parts. Believe it or not, a lot of parts are still available from Ducati for this bike. From Walter Moto, these well nuts. Got a pack of a dozen well nuts. Some of them on the bike are getting old. And 2 quick disconnects. If you remember when we did our fuel lines under the tank, we added a quick disconnect for the supply and the return fuel lines. This is for that vent line. I was searching for another part, which I'll show you here in a minute, and came across this. This is a 1/4 inch, for 1/4 inch hose or tubing. And so we're going to put this in the same location as the other 2. And now the tank, I won't have to struggle with that vent hose when I want to take the tank off real quick. And when you want to take your tank off real quick, last thing you want to do is be struggling with anything. So we're going to get that on. And then this is for the vent line that comes out of the top of the tank. And I'm going to set the camera up here on its tripod, and we're going to show you how this works. So it's kind of neat. Let's see if we can get this to focus on here. There we go. It's a twist lock. Comes apart just like that. I'm looking through the camera, so it's a little tough, but we'll do it again for you. Twist lock. And what's cool about this is these nipples, these barbs rotate. So what's cool about this is the barbs rotate in the quick disconnect. Both sides rotate. So if there's twisting of the hoses, it does not allow the fitting to come apart, which is a neat feature. So, and the reason we're putting this on is typically the vent hose from the tank ends at the bottom of the steering stem. Like I think I said before, if your gas tank is full and it's out in the sun on a hot day, you will get expansion, and it will allow gas to come out through that vent hose, and it ends right above the fender, and I have a custom painted carbon fender, and I've had to touch it up 2 times now. In fact, it's at the painter right now. We're waiting on getting some carbon pieces back from the painter. But we're going to route that hose now down with the other hose that comes from the overflow, the bottom of the tank. But when you do that, then you can't lift your tank up. You have to undo all your tie wraps on your frame and all that. So what this will allow us to do is, before we lift the tank up, a quick twist, and we can lift our tank up. We don't have to pull the hose out of the steering stem now. And this is really tiny, as you can see. That's super tiny. It's hardly going to even be noticeable, but it's going to serve a purpose.
Okay guys, so we got the third quick disconnect on the gas tank. The third one was for the vent hose. And so now this tank will come off very quickly when you want it to. So those 3 disconnects, the disconnect for the fuel sending unit, and the pump, and this pin right here, and the tank comes off. Now, we also installed our quick disconnect for the vent hose up here. And I'll show you what we did with these hoses. So the one coming from the bottom of the tank, that's kind of an overflow. If you're filling your tank up and you put too much in, that'll overflow and come down. Those are the 2 hoses now. This one used to just end above the fender, and that can be a problem if the tank is full and it's hot out. It can pressurize and drip fuel on your fender. So now this hose comes down out of the stem along the frame and then meets up with the overflow. So those two lines, one is the vent to let air into the tank as you use fuel, and the other is the overflow if you put too much fuel in while you're filling the bike up. So we've got that done. We've got our new dash panels on. That's the one that really needed replaced. It was cracked and discolored. There's the other one that surrounds the fuse block. And we also replaced all of the white tie wraps on the frame. You can see they're nice, pure white, not natural. They really blend in with the frame. So we have all the hoses tidied up now with new tie wraps. We've got our cam covers back on. We resprayed and detailed those. Those are looking nice. So all in all, the motor's looking really great. The detailing is pretty much finished on everything. We also put all new well nuts, these rubber well nuts on the frame. Those are all new now. And we went ahead, I wanted to wait until the fender that I'm going to use is here and fitted to adjust those brake lines and bleed them, but we needed to get going on this, so I did go ahead and tighten those up, tightened the banjos up today, and bled those calipers, those new calipers, and the new lines. They're all bled. Got a great lever now. So we're getting close. We really need this rear carbon on before I put the rear wheel on. It should be here soon. But as you can see, the bike is just looking really, really well. We'll polish the tank out. We wiped it down, but it could use polish and a nice coat of, I have some ceramic coating, and maybe we'll put some ceramic coating on it. And you can see we've got fresh, clean fluid in the brake reservoir. So guys, check this out. You remember I said that I added that oil temp gauge to my gauge cluster. The bike, most SS's did not have the oil temp gauge
The SPs did, the FEs did, and maybe a Superlight at one point did. But anyway, so the gauge has never read accurately. It would always go full peg to the right not long after the bike started. I knew the oil was not that hot. So what I did, I ordered this huge assortment of resistors off of Amazon. There's like 125 different values, 10 resistors of each value, just a lot of different values. So we took some time, we got the bike warm. I used my infrared gun to check the oil temperature, and then tried about 20 different values until we settled on 1.5K is the value on these resistors. And that put the gauge right exactly where the IR gun said the oil temp was. So we took one of these and used a couple of heat shrink butt connectors, and this is ready to splice in line. So there we go. As you can see, because it's just one thin wire coming in and out of the resistor, and by the way, these are not directional, it doesn't matter which way you put it in. So it's got one thin wire on each side of the resistor. Because of that, I overlapped the heat shrink part of the butt connector, overlapped it slightly to the resistor to give it strength, to take any stress off of that thin wire. So this is ready to splice in line on the wire going to the sending unit. And we should have, hopefully, from now on, an accurate oil temp gauge, which will be great, because for years it just went full peg, and I tried a couple different sending units originally, and neither one, they both of them, it just went, the needle went to full to the right. And so, of course, like I said, there's no way that the bike was running that hot, and I was right. So for $20, if you have a situation with a gauge like that, for 20 bucks, you can get a pile of resistors and see which one works for you, trial and error, and then put one in line, and you'll be good to go. Okay, guys, it's starting to get real now. We got our fenders back from my buddy Thad Cunningham, who lives in the area. He's an awesome custom painter. He actually painted this carbon fiber front fender years ago, and it needed a little touch up in the back. Like I said, our fuel vent line on top of the tank was dribbling some gas from time to time on the back of this fender. He fixed that. But this is kind of the best of both worlds. You've got a lot of visible carbon, and we've got this beautiful stripe. And with the Ducati Corsa logo applied and clear coated over. And I just like the way this looks. The original SPs and Superlights, they had carbon fiber fenders, just plain carbon. And I think the stripe gives it a little interest. And in my opinion, and what I was going for with this stripe, was the look of an old vintage GP bike, when that's really all there was for a fender, where you're seeing the paint. There was really not a lot of side area to those fenders, and so that's what we were going for. And I think we did it. I really like the look of it, and I hope you do too. The front end is complete now. Had to adjust the new brake lines a little bit to get them off the fender. No big deal. Did not have to re-bleed. So that's the front. And I've had this new carbon rear hugger laying around for quite some time. Never put it on, just waiting for the right time. And as you can see, it's a lot shorter and a lot more modern looking than the original rear inner fender on the 900 SS's. The original rear inner fenders covered a lot of that tire on top and on the sides. Like I said, this is a lot more modern style. I think I like it. The carbon on it is beautiful. He actually re-cleared this rear fender when he did the front. I wasn't real crazy about the clear coat on it. And this is a new carbon fiber chain guard that I just ordered this year, and it matches the rear fender very nicely. So we needed that on before we could get the rear wheel assembly on. As you can see, that's done. Cleaned that chain up. It's an older gold chain. Sprockets were in real good shape. We had this, I machined that sprocket counterboard for those black titanium 12 points. And just reused that sprocket. We're going to reuse that chain. New titanium axle nuts and chain adjusting hardware. New blocks, slider blocks for adjusting the chain. Those are new this year. Something else we did since the last clip, I decided to put a battery tender pigtail on this bike. This bike has never had a battery tender pigtail. But since there's no choke, these are flat slides, no choke on these, this beast can be a little cold-blooded. So when I want to start it, I want full power to crank this thing to get it running. So new battery, that's the anti-gravity battery, and picked up another charger that charges lithium batteries, same as the charger we have for the K1300S. Haven't really showed you guys this bike. This is a 2009 K1300S BMW. I bought this as a leftover in 2010, and it is lava orange metallic, and this is my touring bike, sport touring bike. My wife and I have ridden this all over the eastern United States and into the Midwest, as far west as Sedalia, Missouri, for one of the national BMW rallies. This thing is so smooth, so fast, 176 horsepower stock, and it is a few minor modifications, nothing crazy. Stock exhaust. We've added some pieces here and there, but getting back to the Ducati, the pigtail, and we have that resistor in line now. You really can't see it. It's all covered with heat shrink tubing, and that resistor was so our oil temp gauge would be accurate when the bike was warmed up, and it is. It's been tested. We are getting close, guys. We are getting real close. Just really the bodywork, the tail section, the fairing panels, the front headlight fairing, windscreen to put on yet. We're real close, but so we got the fenders on, got the wheel on, chain adjusted, chain cleaned today. Just kind of went over it and hit it with a rag a little bit, but this bike is, I'm very, very pleased with it this year. It's really coming along well. I think you'd be really hard pressed to find anything wrong with this 1992 Ducati 900 SS. So that's where we're at right now. And probably the next time we visit this bike, it's going to have all of its body work on, and it is going to be ready to ride. But I am just very, very excited to show this bike a few times this year. We are not going to put a ton of miles on it. It's just some of these parts are a little tough to get. So we're going to finish it. We're going to tune it a little bit. I think the idle mixture screws
could use a little adjustment, we're going to do that and call it a day. And just take care of it. Keep it nice. Start it once in a while. Put a couple miles on it here and there. As you can see, you can't even really see that fender, inner fender from the back. Real abbreviated. I like it. I like the look. It gives it more of a modern look compared to the original style, which was just a lot more coverage. So that's it for now. Hey guys, thanks for checking out this video. The Ducati is back in the sun and it is absolutely gorgeous. This was well worth the work and the money and the time that it took this winter to bring this Ducati back. Look at those brand new Pirellis, Rosa Corsa 2s. Best tires that have ever been on this motorcycle. Get a peek of that carbon fiber inner, carbon fiber belt covers, cast magnesium Marvick Penna 2 wheels, STM slipper clutch. We're going to take it out today and finish bedding these pads in. Had it out for a little shakedown run before we put the bodywork on it a few days ago. We've started to rub the clear coat off of the rotors. We clear coated these rotors so that the parts that don't make contact with the pads do not rust over time. These are cast full floating rotors. Vintage. We talked about those in the video. My buddy Thad Cunningham custom painted this front carbon fiber fender a bunch of years ago and he touched it up this year. It's looking sweet. Original decal, original windscreen on a 1992 motorcycle. That's tough to find. Polished intake runners, polished valve covers. Billet exhaust flanges. STM slave, brand new front tubo, carbon Kevlar, brake and clutch lines. Thad Cunningham also hand painted this super light tail section. Absolutely beautiful. That is not a decal. That's handwork. And he did an amazing job. So this bike has all the best Ducati performance parts on it. Started life as a
regular 92 900 SS. Now it's loaded with SP and Superlight parts. A white frame, gorgeous. Titanium rotor bolts all the way around. New axle sliders, titanium axle nuts, titanium chain adjusting hardware. The bike is just spotless. Guys, one favor for you Ducati parts hoarders out there. Back in the day, Ducati made carbon fiber side panels for this bike. I would love to have a pair. If anybody out there has Ducati Performance carbon fiber side panels that fit this model year, would be 91 through 98, give me a shout out in the comments. I'd love to have them. I'll pay you what you need for them. They have to be in new or as new condition though. Stain tuned spaghetti header. Beautiful sound, beautiful quality with the stain tune. I don't think it gets much finer. I don't think it gets much finer than stain tune. Made in Australia. Just a gorgeous looking and sounding system. New Brembo calipers. Restored vintage Ducati Brembo. Full floating rotors, Cerakoted carriers. Rebuilt Shawa 41s with travel indicator installed. Rosa Corsa 2s. This bike is really going to handle. This has always been a great handling bike, but with these tires, very excited to check these out. Carbon fiber chain guards this year, along with a revised newer style carbon fiber rear fender, polished swing arm, Hyper Pro sprung rear shock with Race Tech innards. That was done a few years ago. Rebuilt flat slides. Okay, that's enough talking. She is complete. We're going to put a plate on this, get geared up, and take you for a ride. I think you're going to enjoy this. Thanks for watching. And if you like this content, please like and subscribe. And give me your comments on this bike. Could this be the nicest Ducati 900 SS of this era? I think it may be. It has won awards in Daytona Bike Week Ducati Days 2007. Best belt drive 750 to 1000 cc Ducati. And the bike is even better now than it was back then. We've really upped the game on this Ducati. Tell me what you think.
So far, so good. Brand new Pirelli Roadster Corsa 2s. Try to scrub them in a little bit before we get to the good stuff. The bike's pulling really well. I hope you can hear what I can hear, because it really sounds good to me. Just cruising at 7,000 RPM. Speedo says 100. It's probably close. Upright. I'm not a real tall guy, so this screen gives me a decent amount of protection without having to get into a crouch. Trying to bed these pads in and get that clear coat rubbed off these discs. Bike's working really well. Tires feel great. Running 32 psi in the front, 36 in the back. Not a bad little run up that hill. That was a little full throttle pull right there. Can't complain. Not for a 2-valve twin. Probably bump this idle down a little bit. He's idling a little fast. Should be 1250. That's just about right. Yeah, it's hanging up just a hair. That's not bad. Let's settle into a nice 1250. That'll work. We going to concentrate. Let's see what this rotor looks like. Yeah, we're starting to get it bedded in. It's going to take a little bit to get the pads to match these discs. You can see a high spot here, and it's starting to pad in on the outer diameter of the disc. So it doesn't feel as good as it could right now. And the lever, it's okay. It's not so much the lever, it's just that the pads haven't made it to the rotor yet. We'll take a couple more runs down the hill, and well, maybe we'll get some real heat in those this time. Trying out this new chin mount with the Insta360 and a Rode Lav Go. throttle response with these flat slides is just incredible. I'm working on these pads now. They will mate up eventually. Yeah, starting to get stronger. I have this bike set up fairly stiff. It's almost like riding a solid block of aluminum. It's very, very solid. I think the brake's starting to feel better with every pull. Oh yeah. Yeah, they're really starting to get strong. I'm going to give you, we're headed back into the residential area here, and that's my little test track. Nice little mountain climb. But I'm going to show you how well this thing pulls down low in the higher gears. Third gear. Now we're in fourth gear, just 4,000 RPM. Bike has just, it pulls like a tractor. Fifth gear, 4,000 RPM. We're in sixth gear. 3,500 RPM. Love it. These mirrors, they look nice. They're not the best mirrors in the world, but if you take them off, I think the bike looks like crap. And sometimes they don't want to stay tight. If you adjust them at all, it's like a ball and socket with a Phillips head screw that tightens them up, and you can tighten them, but if you adjust them, sometimes it can make it loose. So what you have to do is get them right and be real careful taking them off, and then tighten them up and put them back on. Take the green or the yellow. Bike is a lot of fun to ride. What's great about this bike is you do not have to wring its neck to get it to go. I mean, a red line's at 9,000 RPM, where a lot of modern sport bikes, you know, they rev a lot higher than that. Oh yeah, the brakes are starting to feel a lot better. gotta love that dry clutch. The dry slipper clutch, no less. That cross right there, if you saw it. A couple were riding there. We're just going to say cruiser. And no helmet, neither one of them. Somehow they fell over right there at a really low speed. She hit her head, and that's the memorial to her. So guys, you know, and to each his own, but if you're riding a motorcycle and you don't have a helmet on, you're just asking for a lot of pain and suffering at some point. I don't care how good you are. Accidents happen. So well, I'm pretty happy with this test ride. I can't complain. Oh yeah. Yeah, pads are starting to bed in. I'll take it. Little chatter from the clutch there. I forget how many miles this particular clutch has on it, but it's got a few. It might not hurt to put fresh plates in this. We don't abuse this clutch. We don't drag this bike or do burnouts, or I mean, that's not what these bikes are made for. This is a little road racer. It's not a drag racer. It's made to, you know, go out and have some fun, mountain roads, Well, thanks for riding along with us and checking out this video. I know if you're a vintage Ducati guy, why, I hope you enjoyed it. If you're not familiar with vintage Ducatis, I hope you learned a little bit, and I hope you enjoyed the bike. So we're going to take her back to the garage, and we have a show next weekend at the local Harley-Davidson dealership. Might get some footage there, having a little rally there, and they usually get quite a turnout of all different kind of bikes. The Harley guys, they like the Ducati, especially the older Ducati. One thing about these vintage Ducatis, everybody seems to love them. You know, the Japanese sport bike riders, the metric cruiser guys, the American cruiser guys. Everybody always has a lot of questions. They like the way it sounds. All those lightweight internals really help this thing rev quickly. I'll tell you what, I'm starting to get the feel for these Pirellis, and I really like them. But you know, lightweight flywheel, lightweight clutch basket, and of course the flat slide carbs. That goes a long way. Yeah, idling good. That's about right. That's about the way it's always been. All right, thanks for going along.